First mistake I made that night was following the crying. The second was opening my apartment door 24 hours later and finding a Mafia boss standing on the other side. Rain hammered against the awning outside Murphy's bar, hard enough to drown out traffic, turning the Brooklyn street into a river of blurred headlights and reflections. My shift had ended 40 minutes ago, but I'd stayed late wiping tables because going home to my tiny apartment usually felt lonelier than exhaustion. By the time I finally stepped outside, the storm had gotten worse. Cold wind shoved against me as I pulled my coat tighter and started walking toward the subway station with my head down and my earbuds in. I almost missed the sound. Almost. A little voice. Crying. Thin. Panicked. Somewhere beneath the rumble of thunder. I stopped under a flickering street light and pulled one earbud free. For a second, all I heard was rainwater rushing through gutters. Then it came again. Help. My stomach tightened instantly. The sound came from beneath the overpass near the old train tracks 2 blocks away. Every instinct told me not to go near it. I was a 26-year-old woman alone after midnight in Brooklyn during a storm. Smart people kept walking. Smart people called 911 and stayed out of it. But there was something about the fear in that child's voice that hit me straight in the chest. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was already running, rain soaked through my sneakers as I crossed the empty street. My pulse hammered louder with every step toward the dark space beneath a bridge. Shadows moved near a white cargo van parked crooked beside the curb. I froze behind a concrete pillar, breathing hard. 2 men stood near the open side. One kept looking up and down the street, while the other leaned halfway inside the van, saying something sharp I couldn't hear over the storm. Then I saw the little boy, curled against the far corner of the van seat. Small, dark hair, maybe 7 years old. His face streaked with tears. Fear rolled through me so fast it made my hands shake. I didn't think. I grabbed the first thing I could find beside the pillar, a loose glass bottle someone had left near the trash, and hurled it as hard as I could toward the opposite side of the street. The bottle shattered loudly against metal. Both men turned instantly toward the noise. That was enough. I sprinted forward before my brain could catch up. "Hey," I shouted. "Police are coming." One of them cursed. The other moved toward me, but I yanked the van door hard enough to slam it against the frame, grabbed the little boy's hand, and ran. Adrenaline made everything blurry after that. Rain. Footsteps. My lungs burning. The boy stumbled once, but I pulled him upright and kept going until we reached the crowded convenience store near Atlantic Avenue. Only then did I stop. The cashier looked up in alarm as we burst through the door, dripping water onto the tile floor. The little boy clung to my sleeve so tightly his fingers hurt. I knelt in front of him carefully. "Hey," I whispered, trying to steady my breathing. "You're okay now?" He didn't answer. His green eyes stayed locked on the window like he expected someone to come through it at any second. Up close, he looked expensive in a way kids usually don't. Cashmere coat. Tiny leather shoes. A watch on his wrist that probably cost more than my rent. But none of that mattered compared to how terrified he looked. "What's your name?" I asked softly. His lips trembled before he finally whispered, "Noah, okay, Noah, I'm clear." Another crash of thunder shook the windows. The boy flinched hard enough to make my chest ache. Then suddenly, front door of the convenience store opened again. Every muscle in Noah's body locked instantly. I turned fast, expecting the men from before. Instead, a tall man in a black wool coat stepped inside, surrounded by 3 others in dark suits. The entire store went silent. Even the cashier stopped moving. The man looked around once before his eyes landed on the boy beside me. Relief lashed across his face so quickly I almost missed it. Then it disappeared behind something colder. Controlled. Dangerous. Noah let go of my sleeve and whispered one word. "Pop." The man crossed the store in seconds and dropped to one knee in front of the boy, gripping his shoulders carefully like he needed to make sure he was real. Rain glistened in his dark hair. His jaw looked carved from stone, but it was his eyes that froze me in place, pale green, sharp enough to cut through bone. Noah buried himself against him silently. The man closed his eyes for one brief second before looking at me. Really looking at me. Like he was memorizing my face. "You saved my son," he said quietly. His voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that hides dangerous things underneath. I opened my mouth to answer, but Noah grabbed his father's coat tighter and whispered something into his ear. The man's expression changed instantly, darkened. Slowly, he stood to his full height. At least 6'3". The entire room suddenly felt too small for him. Then his gaze returned to me again. "Did they see your face?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "What?" "The men who took him." His eyes never left mine. "Did they see your face, Claire?" The way he said my name made cold spread down my spine because I had never told him what it was. There are people who walk into a room and make you feel safer. Luca Moretti walked into a room and everyone else stopped breathing. The convenience store suddenly felt too bright, too quiet. Rainwater dripped from my coat onto the tile floor, while Luca Moretti stood 3 feet away studying me like I was part of a problem he had not solved yet. One of the men behind him touched his earpiece and murmured something low enough that I could not hear. Luca ignored him completely. His attention stayed fixed on me. "I asked you a question," he said calmly. Noah still clung to the side of his father's coat without looking up. I swallowed hard. I do not know. It was dark. Luca's jaw tightened slightly. Not anger. Calculation. The dangerous kind. "Did they speak to you?" "No." "Did they follow you here?" "I do not think so." He stared at me for another second that felt much longer than it should have. Then he looked toward the cashier, locked the door. The cashier obeyed immediately without argument. Fear moved through the room like cold air. I should have left right then. Any normal person would have. But my legs felt rooted to the floor while Noah slowly loosened his grip on his father and looked back at me with huge, frightened eyes. "Claire stays," he whispered suddenly. Luca looked down at his son in surprise. The little boy's voice had barely been audible, but something about it changed the atmosphere instantly. One of the suited men near the door glanced at another like he had just witnessed something impossible. Luca crouched slightly beside Noah again. "You know her name." Noah nodded against his shoulder. "She saved me." The words came out shaky and quiet. Luca's expression shifted for half a second, softer, human. Then it disappeared behind steel again. "Thank you," he said finally, standing straight once more. The words sounded unfamiliar coming from him, like he rarely used them. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. He was scared, I answered quietly. I could not just leave him there. Luca's eyes narrowed slightly at that, like kindness confused him. One of the guards approached carefully. "Sir, the vehicle is ready." Vehicle, not car. Everything about these men sounded expensive and dangerous at the same time. Luca nodded once before looking back at me. "You live alone?" The question hit me so fast it made my stomach tighten. Why? Because if those men saw your face, your apartment is no longer safe. My pulse stumbled hard against my ribs. "I think you are overreacting." "No," one of the guards muttered under his breath. "He is not." Luca silenced him with one glance. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a black business card with nothing printed on it except a phone number embossed in silver. No company name. No title. Just a number. "If you notice anything unusual," he said, "you call immediately." I stared down at the card. My fingers trembled slightly against the thick paper. "I do not even know who you are." The room went very still after I said it. One of the guards actually looked uncomfortable, but Luca only watched me with that unreadable expression. "That is probably for the best." Then Noah tugged on his sleeve softly. Luca looked down again. "What is it?" "Can she come with?" Question landed in the middle of the room like broken glass. I blinked. "What?" Noah's small hand tightened around his father's coat again. "Please." Luca studied his son carefully. Something unspoken passed across his face. "Worry, maybe. Or exhaustion." "Noah," he said gently. "She has her own life." But the little boy kept looking at me instead. "They will come back," he whispered. I felt cold all over suddenly because deep down I knew he was right. Luca exhaled, slowly, through his nose before turning toward me again. "One of my drivers will take you home. That is not necessary. It was not a request." His voice stayed calm, but the room shifted around the words power, control, the kind that expected obedience because it had never been denied before. Normally that would have made me angry. Instead, it made me nervous enough to stop arguing. 10 minutes later, I sat in the backseat of a black SUV that smelled faintly like leather and cedar while Manhattan lights blurred through rain-covered windows. Noah sat beside me silently wrapped in a blanket one of the guards had found somewhere. Luca sat across from us facing forward with one hand resting against his knee. The city moved outside in flashes of red taillights and wet pavement. Nobody spoke for almost 5 full minutes, then Noah leaned carefully against my arm. Small, exhausted, trusting me in a way that made my chest ache unexpectedly. Luca noticed immediately. Of course he did. Men like him probably noticed everything. His eyes met mine briefly across the dim interior of the SUV. For the first time since I had met him, something dangerous cracked beneath the surface of his expression. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. And that was the moment I realized those men under the bridge had not just taken the wrong child, they had tried to take the only thing Luca Moretti actually loved. Rich people have penthouses. Dangerous men build fortresses and call them homes. I realized the difference the moment the SUV pulled into the underground garage. Steel gates closed behind us with mechanical precision while security cameras tracked every angle of the vehicle. My apartment building did not even have a working front lock half the time. This place looked like it could survive a war. I stared through the tinted window as the SUV rolled to a smooth stop beside a private elevator surrounded by marble walls and armed guards pretending not to be armed guards. Nobody spoke while one of the men opened the door for Luca first. Noah still lay sleepily against my side, wrapped in the dark gray blanket. He looked smaller now. Younger somehow, like the fear had exhausted him completely. Luca stepped out into the garage and turned back toward us. Bring Miss Bennett upstairs. Miss Bennett, formal, controlled, like he had already shoved whatever emotions he felt back behind locked doors. I frowned immediately. Actually, I should go home. One of the guards glanced at Luca carefully before looking away again. Luca remained completely still for a second. No. The word came quietly. Calmly. Somehow that made it more intimidating. You cannot seriously expect me to stay here. I expect you to stay somewhere safe. And this is what you call safe. His eyes met mine directly. Yes. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime before I could argue further. Noah stirred beside me and tightened his small hand around my sleeve again. Please stay, he whispered sleepily. That almost broke me, because suddenly this was not about me being uncomfortable anymore. This little boy looked terrified to let me out of his sight. Luca noticed my hesitation instantly. Of course he did. He seemed like the kind of man who could hear uncertainty breathing. Tonight, he said finally, tomorrow we reevaluate the situation. Reevaluating the situation sounded less like a plan and more like a business negotiation. Still, exhaustion had started sinking into my bones. It was after 2 a.m. My phone battery sat at 6%. And deep down, I could not stop thinking about those men beneath the bridge, about the look in Noah's eyes when he whispered they would come back. So I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed behind us silently. The ride upward felt endless. Noah had fallen asleep completely against my shoulder by the time we reached the penthouse level. When the elevator doors opened, I forgot how to breathe for a second. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, glowing silver through the storm. Dark wood floors stretched beneath soft recessed lighting. Expensive art lined the walls beside shelves filled with books that looked actually read instead of decorative. Everything smelled faintly like cedar smoke and expensive coffee. Elegant. Cold. Beautiful in the same way winter is beautiful. A woman in her 50s appeared from the hallway almost instantly. Madonna Mia, she breathed, rushing toward Noah. Relief flooded her face before she looked up at Luca sharply. What happened later, Livia? Luca's voice softened slightly when speaking to her. Please prepare the east guest room for Miss Bennett. Guest room. My stomach tightened again. This was real. I was actually inside a Mafia boss's penthouse while rain slammed against bulletproof windows 30 stories above Manhattan. Sophia turned toward me with warm brown eyes full of concern. You saved our Noah, she said softly. Before I could answer, Luca carefully lifted the sleeping boy into his arms. The movement caught me off guard. A man built like power and danger should not have looked so gentle carrying a child. Noah instinctively curled against his chest without waking. Luca's expression changed again for the briefest second. Something painfully human flickered there before disappearing behind control. Sophia, he said quietly, tea for Miss Bennett. Then he looked at me. You should rest. I really think I should call the police. The room went still. Not dramatically, quietly, like everyone stopped breathing at once. Luca held my gaze for several long seconds. Claire, he said carefully, the men who took Noah are not people the police will protect you from. Our fear slid cold fingers down my spine. Who are they? People I intend to deal with. The way he said deal with made my chest tighten. Not because he sounded angry. Because he sounded certain. Sophia touched my arm gently before the silence could stretch further. "Come," she said softly. "You look frozen." She led me down a long hallway while Luca disappeared toward another wing carrying Noah. I watched him until he vanished around the corner. "You are afraid of him," Sophia said quietly as we walked. "Should I not be?" A small sad smile crossed her face. "Luca Moretti has spent many years making the world fear him. But Noah," she glanced toward the hallway where he disappeared. "That child is the only thing keeping his soul alive." My guest room looked bigger than my entire apartment. Soft cream blankets covered the massive bed beside windows overlooking rain-soaked Manhattan. A folded set of clean clothes waited neatly on the chair nearby like someone had guessed my size already. That realization should have comforted me. Instead, it unsettled me deeply. Because nothing inside Luca Moretti's world seemed accidental. Sophia handed me a warm mug of chamomile tea before quietly leaving the room alone with my thoughts. I stood near the window staring down at the city lights below while thunder rolled over Manhattan. Somewhere inside this enormous penthouse, armed men guarded every entrance, while one of the most dangerous men in New York tucked his son into bed. None of this felt real. Then my phone buzzed suddenly inside my coat pocket. Unknown number. My pulse stumbled instantly. Slowly I answered. Silence greeted me for 3 long seconds. Then a man's voice whispered softly through the speaker, "You should not have taken the boy." The line went dead immediately, and for the first time that night I understood why Luca Moretti had looked at me like someone already marked. Nothing feels more terrifying than realizing danger already knows your name. I stared at my dark phone screen while my heartbeat slammed so hard against my ribs it physically hurt. The room suddenly felt smaller, colder. The anonymous voice still echoed inside my head. "You should not have taken the boy." My hands shook as I locked the phone and backed away from the window instinctively like someone might already be watching from another building across Manhattan. For a second, I seriously considered grabbing my coat and leaving immediately. I did not belong here. None of this was my work. 12 hours ago, my biggest concern had been overdue rent and whether my manager would cut my shifts again after Christmas. Now armed men guarded the hallway outside my bedroom while strangers threatened me over the phone because I helped a terrified child. I barely slept at all. Every sound inside the penthouse made me jolt awake. Footsteps in the hallway. Elevator doors opening somewhere in the distance. Low voices murmuring behind walls. At around 5 in the morning, I finally gave up trying to sleep and wandered quietly toward the kitchen in borrowed sweatpants Sophia had left folded on the bed. The penthouse looked different before sunrise. Softer somehow. Blue city light spilled through the windows while the storm faded into a steady drizzle over Manhattan. I padded barefoot across the dark wood floor and stopped short when I realized I was not alone. Luca stood near the windows holding a coffee mug in one hand while the skyline glowed behind him. He wore black slacks and a dark sweater instead of the expensive coat from earlier, but somehow he looked even more intimidating without the armor of formal clothes. More real. More dangerous. He glanced toward me immediately. "You should be asleep." His voice sounded rougher this early in the morning. Less polished. I crossed my arms tightly. I got a phone call. Something cold flashed across his expression instantly. What kind of call? A man told me I should not have taken Noah. Luca went completely still, not dramatic, controlled, the kind of stillness that made the air heavier around him. Slowly, he set the coffee mug down on the marble counter. "Did he say anything else?" "No, unknown number." I nodded. Luca's jaw tightened once before he pulled a phone from his pocket and sent a message without another word. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. "You knew this would happen," I said quietly. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. I hoped it would not. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Frustration rose sharp and fast inside my chest. "You keep talking like I am already involved in something without telling me what any of this actually is." Luca studied me carefully before exhaling slowly. "Claire, there are people in this city who use children to send messages." The calmness in his voice somehow made the words worse. "Noah was targeted because he is my son." "Why?" His eyes darkened slightly. "Because hurting me directly is difficult." I stared at him for a second. "That is insane." "Yes." No defensiveness. No, not a simple acceptance that chilled me unexpectedly. I rubbed my arms against the cold creeping across my skin. I should leave. Luca's gaze sharpened immediately. "No, you do not get to decide that." "Actually," he said quietly, "until I know who made that call, I do." Anger flickered through me. "You cannot keep me here." I can keep you alive." The words landed hard between us. I opened my mouth to argue again when small footsteps padded into the kitchen behind me. Noah stood in the doorway wearing navy pajamas, his dark hair messy from sleep. His eyes found me instantly. Relief softened his little face so fast it hurt to look at. "You stayed," he whispered. Something inside Luca's expression changed, watching his son say that. Tiny. Almost invisible. But there. Noah walked directly toward me without hesitation and wrapped his arms around my waist and froze for half a second before carefully hugging him back. He felt warm and heartbreakingly small. "Bad dream?" I asked softly. Noah nodded against my sweater. The van came back. My chest tightened painfully. Luca looked away toward the windows for one brief second, like hearing that physically hurt him. Then he crossed the kitchen and crouched beside his son. "You are safe here," he said quietly. Noah looked between us uncertainly before whispering, "Can Claire stay today?" Silence settled over the kitchen again. I should have said no immediately. Instead, I looked at the child clinging to me like I was the only thing making the fear manageable and felt my resistance weaken in ways that made no sense. Luca watched me carefully. One day, he said finally. After that, we discussed what happens next. The fact that he phrased it like a negotiation almost made me roll my eyes. Almost before I could answer, one of the guards appeared near the hallway entrance looking tense. "Sir," he said carefully, "we found the vehicle." Luca's entire demeanor changed instantly, cold. Focused. Noah noticed too because he stepped closer against my side. "Where?" Luca asked quietly. "Abandoned in Queens." A long pause followed. Then the guard added carefully, "There was a message inside." Something dangerous flickered behind Luca's eyes. "What message?" The guard hesitated. His gaze shifted toward Noah and then toward me, before lowering slightly. "It said they know about the girl." And just like that, I realized I was no longer standing near Luca Moretti's world anymore. I was already inside it. The strange thing about fear is how quickly it changes shape. The man under the bridge scared me. The message inside, that abandoned van, terrified me. But nothing unsettled me more than the way Luca Moretti reacted when he heard the words, "They know about the girl." He did not shout, did not panic. He simply became colder, sharper, like someone quietly loading a weapon inside his mind. "Double security," he said calmly to the guard. "Nobody enters this floor without my approval." The guard nodded immediately and disappeared down the hallway. Noah looked up at his father nervously. "Papa?" Luca's entire expression softened the second he looked at his son again. It happened so fast I almost wondered if I imagined it. "Everything is fine," he said quietly. Noah studied him carefully like children do when they already know adults are lying to protect them. Then his small hand reached for mine again under the kitchen counter. Instinctively, I squeezed it back. Luca noticed. Of course he noticed. His eyes flicked briefly toward our hands before returning to Noah's face. "Sophia is making pancakes," he said gently. "Why did not you help her?" Noah hesitated. "What about Claire?" "Claire will still be here after breakfast." The little boy finally nodded and disappeared down the hallway, slowly glancing back twice before leaving the room completely. The second he was gone, the warmth disappeared from Luca's face like someone flipping a switch. "You cannot leave this penthouse today." I stared at him in disbelief. "You really think you can just decide that for me?" "I think someone threatened you less than 8 hours ago. That does not give you control over my life." Luca walked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan while rain streaked across the glass behind him. "Claire, if they know your name, your face, and where you were last night, then your life already changed, whether you accept it or not." I hated how calm he sounded, hated that part of me. I knew he was probably right. "Who are these people?" I asked again quietly. Luca stayed silent for a long moment. "Men who believe fear is power. And you are different." That made him glance back at me slowly. Something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. "Not as different as you would probably like." Honesty should not have made him more dangerous somehow. But it did. I crossed my arms tightly. "You still have not explained why someone would risk kidnapping your son in the middle of New York." Luca looked away toward the skyline again. "Because my enemies know Noah is the only leverage that matters." There was no ego in the statement, no arrogance, just exhausted truth. Before I could respond, Sophia entered carrying a tray loaded with coffee, fruit and pancakes shaped badly enough that I immediately knew Noah probably helped make them enough serious faces, she announced firmly. The child already had enough fear for one lifetime. Luca exhaled quietly through his nose like he knew better than to argue with her. Sophia placed a mug of coffee in front of me and lowered her voice gently. Eat something, Kara, you look pale. I had not realized how hungry I was until the smell hit me. Warm maple syrup, fresh coffee, butter melting into pancakes. The normalness of it felt surreal inside this fortress filled with armed guards and whispered threats. Noah came running back into the kitchen a moment later holding a crooked pancake with chocolate chips for eyes. This one is for Claire, he announced softly. Something worn twisted painfully in my chest. Thank you, I smiled. Noah climbed into the chair beside mine instead of sitting near his father. Luca noticed that too. He noticed everything. Breakfast became strangely quiet after that. Not awkward exactly, just unfamiliar. Noah slowly relaxed enough to talk in short sentences about dinosaurs and comic books, while Sophia corrected his table manners every 30 seconds in rapid Italian. I found myself laughing once. A real laugh. The sound surprised me enough that I covered my mouth immediately afterward. Luca looked up from his untouched coffee at the exact moment it happened. His gaze stayed on me a second too long. What? I asked self-consciously. Nothing. But it clearly was not nothing. Noah tugged lightly on my sleeve. Will you see my room? Luca immediately interrupted. Noah. The little boy's face fell instantly. Please, he whispered. I looked between them, uncertain. Luca rubbed one hand slowly across his jaw, before finally nodding once. 10 minutes. Noah grinned for the first time since I met him and grabbed my hand excitedly. The sudden burst of happiness on his face hit Luca harder than he expected. I saw it happen. The brief crack in his composure. Like watching a man remember sunlight after years underground. Noah pulled me down a long hallway filled with quiet luxury and framed black and white photographs. Most showed New York skylines or old Italian villages, but one photograph near the staircase stopped me cold. A woman stood beside Luca, smiling at the camera while holding a much younger Noah in her arms. Blonde hair, bright eyes, elegant and warm in a way that softened Luca standing beside her. Even in the photo, he looked at her differently than he looked at the rest of the world. Noah noticed where my attention landed. That is my mama, he said quietly. Something inside his voice changed when he said it. Softer. Sadder. She is in heaven now. I swallowed hard. She was beautiful. Noah nodded slowly. Papa does not smile anymore since she left. The word settled heavily into my chest because suddenly I understood something terrifying about Luca Moretti. The world feared him because he was powerful. But grief was the thing that truly hollowed him out. Some homes are so quiet you can hear the sadness living inside them. Noah's bedroom did not look like the room of a child growing up normally. It looked preserved. Careful. Protected, shelves lined the walls filled with books. Dinosaur figures. And model airplanes still perfectly arranged like nobody touched them anymore. Unless someone else encouraged it first. Soft afternoon light spilled through tall windows overlooking Manhattan, while rain tapped gently against the glass. Noah climbed onto the carpet beside a half-finished puzzle and looked up at me uncertainly. Do you like dinosaurs? He asked quietly. I love dinosaurs, I answered, sitting cross-legged beside him. Although I think the Triceratops deserved more attention, that made him smile faintly. Tiny, but real. Papa likes the T-Rex, of course he does. Noah giggled softly at that before quickly glancing toward the door like he was checking whether someone heard him. The sound hit me strangely hard because children should never sound surprised by their own laughter. We spent almost an hour on the floor finishing the puzzle while Noah slowly opened up in cautious little pieces. He liked astronomy. Hated thunderstorms. Slept with the hallway light on even though he claimed he was too old for nightlights now. Every few minutes he asked if I was leaving soon. Every time, something in my chest tightened a little more. Around noon, Sophia came upstairs carrying fresh towels and stopped cold when she saw Noah talking animatedly about planets while showing me one of his comic books. Her eyes widened slightly. Madonna, she whispered softly. What? I asked. Sophia glanced toward Noah carefully before lowering her voice. He has not spoken this much with anyone outside family in almost a year. I looked toward the little boy sitting beside me, coloring quietly now. Why? Sophia's expression softened painfully after his mother died. Something inside him became afraid of the world. Before I could ask more, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Heavy, controlled. Noah immediately looked toward the door. Luca appeared a second later, still dressed in dark clothes. one hand holding his phone while another man followed behind him speaking rapid Italian under his breath. The second Luca noticed Noah smiling slightly beside me, he stopped walking altogether. His associate kept talking another 2 full seconds before realizing Luca was no longer listening. Silence settled over the hallway. Noah held up his drawing carefully. "Look, Papa." Luca's eyes lowered toward the page. A small solar system colored unevenly in blue and silver crayon. Saturn, Noah explained softly. Luca stared at the drawing long enough that something shifted behind his eyes, not just affection, shock, like he had forgotten this version of his son still existed somewhere. "That is very good," he said quietly. Noah beamed instantly. The associate standing beside Luca looked stunned. So did Sophia, and suddenly I understood something else about this family. These moments were rare enough to feel miraculous. Luca handed his phone to the other man without looking away from Noah. "Cancel my 2 o'clock meeting." The man blinked. "Sir," did I stutter? "No, sir." He disappeared immediately. Luca stepped inside the room. Slowly after that, Noah shifted closer against my side instinctively, and Luca noticed. There was no jealousy in his expression, only something thoughtful. "Careful. Sophia tells me you like astronomy," Luca said to his son. Noah nodded. "Claire knows about stars." I laughed softly. "I know approximately 4th grade level astronomy." "Still more than me," Luca admitted. That surprised me enough to glance at him quickly. He leaned one shoulder lightly against the doorway, watching Noah instead of me. "You do not seem like the type of man who admits weak." Luca's mouth almost curved into a smile. "Almost. Only around honest people." The answer caught me off guard enough that I looked away first. Dangerous men should not have voices that soft, or eyes that tired. Noah tugged gently on my sleeve again. "Can Claire stay for dinner?" Luca's attention shifted toward me fully then. The room suddenly felt smaller under the weight of his gaze. "That depends," he said quietly. "On what?" I asked. "On whether Claire still wants to leave." Silence settled heavily between us, because the truth was I did not know anymore. Fear still sat cold inside my stomach every time I remembered the phone call, the threats, the men beneath the bridge. But somehow this place no longer felt entirely frightening either. There was warmth hidden beneath the steel walls, a lonely child, a grieving father, a household trying desperately to hold itself together with routine and security guards and silence. Before I could answer, a sharp alarm suddenly echoed through the penthouse. Loud. Urgent. Noah flinched violently beside me. Luca moved instantly, 1 second calm, the next completely transformed. Protective instinct rolled off him so powerfully it changed the air pressure in the room. He crossed the space in 2 strides and pulled Noah behind him automatically while voices exploded through hidden speakers near the ceiling. Security breach. East elevator, access compromised. My heartbeat stopped cold. Luca's face turned deadly calm as another guard's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sir, someone made it to the private floor." Then all the lights in the penthouse went dark. Darkness changes people in seconds. One moment I stood beside Noah, in a warm bedroom filled with crayons and dinosaur books. The next, every light inside the penthouse vanished, and the entire world became fear and silence. Noah grabbed my hand instantly. Hard. The emergency alarm stopped abruptly, making the quiet somehow worse. Outside the windows, Manhattan still glowed through the rain, but inside the penthouse, everything felt trapped underwater. Luca did not panic. That terrified me more than if he had. He moved with cold precision through the darkness, one arm instinctively shielding Noah behind him, while his other hand reached beneath his sweater towards something hidden at his back. "Stay behind me," he ordered quietly. The calmness in his voice sent chills across my skin. Somewhere down the hallway, footsteps echoed sharply, followed by muffled voices through hidden earpieces. Then Sophia appeared near the doorway holding a flashlight with trembling hands. "Luca," she whispered, "the backup generators are not responding." Luca's jaw tightened immediately. That was intentional. Noah pressed closer against my side. "Papa, you are safe," Luca said instantly without looking back. But his posture told a different story entirely. Every muscle in his body looked prepared for impact. Another voice crackled through the hallway speaker overhead. "Sir, security teams are sweeping the east corridor now." Luca stepped toward the doorway. "Nobody moves, Noah." The command landed like steel. 2 guards appeared seconds later, carrying flashlights and speaking rapid Italian under their breath. One handed Luca a small device that looked like a phone, while the other checked the hallway carefully. Luca pressed something on the screen. A moment later, dim emergency lights flickered on throughout the penthouse in low red strips along the floor. The glow painted everything in shadows. Noah looked terrified. I crouched beside him carefully. "Hey," I whispered softly. "Look at me." His breathing came too fast. Small panic breaths. "It is okay." The lights went out before, he whispered shakily. "When Mama," he stopped suddenly. The unfinished sentence hit the room like broken glass. Luca froze near the doorway, just for a second. Then he looked away sharply toward the hallway like he physically could not bear hearing the rest. My chest tightened painfully. I wrapped an arm gently around Noah's shoulders. "You are not alone now," I told him quietly. Something changed in Luca's face when he heard that, tiny, almost invisible beneath all the control. But there. One of the guards touched his earpiece suddenly. So Luca turned instantly. "What?" No sign of forced entry. Silence. "Impossible," Luca said coldly. "The elevators were compromised." "Yes, sir." But the guard hesitated carefully. All biometric locks remained untouched. A strange feeling crept slowly into my stomach. Luca sensed it too, because his expression darkened immediately. "Someone inside the building helped them," he said quietly. The room went still. Even the guards exchanged uneasy glances. Noah looked up nervously. "Someone bad?" Luca crossed back toward us slowly and crouched in front of his son. The dangerous aura surrounding him softened just enough for Noah to breathe easier again. "I'm handling it. Promise?" Luca held his son's gaze for a long second. "I promise." The certainty in his voice felt absolute, terrifyingly absolute. One of the guards approached again. "Sir, there is something else." Luca stood slowly. "What now?" "We found a phone outside the private elevator." Luca extended his hand immediately. The guard placed the phone into it carefully like it might explode. Water dripped from the cracked screen. Luca pressed the power button once. The video automatically started playing. I only caught pieces from where I stood. Dark footage. Rain. A blurry street camera angle from beneath the bridge last night. My stomach dropped cold because the video showed me running toward the van, pulling Noah away. Luca's expression became unreadable as the footage continued. Then the screen glitched, suddenly before white text appeared across the display. We saw her first. Noah buried his face against my side immediately. I felt him shaking. Luca locked the phone screen, slowly before looking toward his guards. "Find out who brought this in my building." Nobody moved for half a second. The air around him had changed completely now, quieter, dead lighter. "Now," Luca said softly. The guards disappeared instantly. I stared at him carefully. "This is insane." Luca looked exhausted suddenly, older somehow. "You should have never been dragged into this." "Then let me leave." His eyes snapped toward mine immediately. "No." Anger flashed through me. "You cannot keep saying no like I belong to you." The second the words left my mouth, silence swallowed the room. Luca stared at me with an expression I could not read. Not anger. Something more dangerous than that. Noah looked nervously between us. Then quietly, almost too quietly to hear, he whispered, "I do not want her to go." The room changed again after that. Because Luca looked at his son, really looked at him, and for the first time since I met him, I saw fear break through the armor completely. Not fear for himself, fear of losing the only two people standing in front of him. Grief leaves fingerprints on people, even when they pretend to be made of steel. The emergency lights cast long red shadows across the penthouse while rain continued sliding down the windows overlooking Manhattan. Nobody spoke for several seconds after Noah whispered that he did not want me to leave. Luca stood perfectly still in the middle of the room, staring at his son with something raw hidden behind his controlled expression. Then he looked at me. We should talk privately. Every instinct told me refusing was smarter. But curiosity had already become its own kind of danger around Luca Moretti. I nodded once. Sophia quietly led Noah toward the kitchen with promises of hot chocolate while Luca waited near the hallway entrance. The second Noah disappeared from view. The warmth vanished from Luca's face completely. He guided me silently through another corridor deeper inside the penthouse. This section felt different. Colder somehow. Less lived in. We stopped in front of a black door near the end of the hallway. Luca hesitated before opening it slowly. The room beyond stole the breath from my lungs. It was not an office. It was a memorial. Soft gray curtains framed tall windows overlooking the city while shelves filled with books and photographs lined the walls. Fresh white roses sat in crystal vases near the fireplace. A piano rested quietly in the corner beneath framed sheet music. Everything looked untouched, preserved perfectly in time. My eyes drifted toward the largest photograph above the mantel, the same blonde woman from Noah's picture downstairs, smiling beside Luca under summer sunlight somewhere near the ocean. Her name was Elena, Luca said quietly behind me. His voice sounded different inside this room, lower, tired. I turned slowly toward him. This was her room. Parley. He walked toward the fireplace with measured steps. After she died, I could not bring myself to change anything. There was no shame in the confession, just exhaustion. I glanced around again carefully. Noah said, "You do not smile anymore." Something flickered painfully across Luca's face before disappearing. Children notice more than we want them to. Silence settled between us. Heavy. Intimate in a way that made me strangely nervous. I studied the photos along the shelves more closely. Elena laughing on a boat. Elena holding baby Noah wrapped in blue blankets. Elena dancing barefoot in a kitchen while Luca watched her with an expression I had never seen him wear around anyone else. Love. Open and undeniable. My chest tightened unexpectedly. She looked happy, I whispered. Luca stared toward the rain outside the windows. She was light in a very dark world. The honesty in his voice made something ache deep inside me. Because dangerous men are easier to fear when they do not sound heartbroken. What happened to her? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Luca went silent for so long I thought he might ignore me completely. Then quietly, almost too quietly to hear, he answered, "Car accident." I frowned slightly. Something about the answer felt rehearsed, too clean. My eyes drifted toward a framed newspaper article partially hidden near the bookshelf. Elena Meride killed in late-night crash. I stepped closer instinctively. Luca noticed immediately. Do not. His voice sharpened enough to stop me cold. Silence followed. Then his expression softened slightly when he realized how harsh he sounded. Some things are better left buried. You do not believe that. Luca's eyes met mine instantly. Excuse me. If you believe that, I said carefully, you would not keep this room exactly the same. Something dangerous moved through his gaze then. Not anger. Recognition, like I accidentally touched a truth he spent years avoiding. Before either of us could speak again, thunder rolled across Manhattan hard enough to shake the windows slightly. I startled instinctively. Luca noticed that too. He noticed everything. You are afraid, he said quietly. I think that is a reasonable reaction considering my current situation. To my surprise, the corner of his mouth almost moved again. Almost a smile. Fair point. The room softened slightly after that. Less tense. More human. I wrapped my arms around myself. You still have not explained why people are willing to risk all of this just to hurt you. Luca looked toward the city lights below. Power creates enemies. That is not the full answer. No. Then tell me the full answer. He stared at me silently for several long seconds. Rain traced silver lines down the glass behind him while shadows cut across his face. Beautiful and dangerous at the same time. Finally, he exhaled slowly. 3 years ago, someone betrayed my family. His voice lowered further. The night Elena died, she was not supposed to be driving alone. Cold crept slowly across my skin. You think her accident was intentional? Luca did not answer immediately. That answer alone terrified me. I think, he said carefully, someone wanted me to suffer. The room suddenly felt much colder. I looked again at the photographs surrounding us, at the preserved roses, the untouched piano. A grieving husband keeping pieces of his wife alive because letting go would feel too much, like losing her twice. Then my eyes caught something strange on the bookshelf near the window, a silver music box partially hidden behind stacked books. The lid sat slightly open, revealing an engraved symbol inside, a small black crown. The second Luca noticed where I was looking, his entire expression changed. Sharp, alert. Where did you get that? He asked quietly. I blinked in confusion. Get what? Luca crossed the room toward the music box so fast it startled me. He picked it up carefully like it might burn him. Then he slowly opened the lid wider. Inside rested a folded piece of paper that definitely had not been there long. Luca unfolded it silently while the color drained from his face. What is it? I whispered. His jaw tightened once before he handed me the note. 4 words stared back at me in neat black ink. She was never the target. Sometimes the truth does not arrive like an explosion. Sometimes it slips quietly into a locked room and leaves 4 words behind that change everything. She was never the target. I stared at the note in my trembling hands while thunder rolled low across Manhattan outside the windows. Lucas stood completely still beside me, but the air around him had changed again, colder, more dangerous than before. Not because he was angry, because he was thinking. Deeply. Carefully, the kind of thinking that looked terrifying on a man like him. "Who put this here?" I whispered. Lucas slowly took the note back from me without answering. His jaw flexed once before he folded the paper neatly and slipped it into his pocket. Nobody enters this room. Clearly somebody did. His eyes snapped toward mine instantly. Sharp enough to stop my breath for half a second. Then he looked away toward the windows again. Not without my permission. Fear crawled slowly through me. "You think someone inside your own building left that?" I know they did. The certainty in his voice made my stomach tighten. Somewhere beyond the hallway, I heard distant movement and low voices as guards continued searching the penthouse floor, but inside Elena's room, everything felt unnaturally quiet, like grief itself was holding its breath. "What does the note mean?" I asked, carefully. Lucas stayed silent long enough that I thought he might refuse to answer again. Then finally, without looking at me, he spoke. 3 years ago, Elena attended a charity event downtown. His voice sounded distant now, like he was forcing himself through broken glass, just to say the words aloud. I was supposed to meet her there after a meeting with my security team. He paused briefly. I never arrived. I watched him carefully while rain traced silver lines down the windows behind him. Because of the betrayal. Luca nodded once. Someone leaked my location that night. My convoy was delayed across the city. Something cold settled inside my chest. And Elena was alone. Yes, the word came out almost soundless. I glanced toward the photograph above the fireplace again. The smiling blonde woman frozen forever in sunlight. "You think the crash was meant for you?" Luca finally looked at me then. His pale green eyes looked exhausted in a way no amount of money or power could hide. I think someone wanted me to watch my life burn from a distance. Silence settled heavily between us after that. Because suddenly this was bigger than a kidnapping, bigger than threats. Someone had spent years tearing pieces out of Luca Moretti's life one by one. And now Noah was next. A sharp knock interrupted the silence. Luca instantly shifted back into control mode. "Enter." One of the guards stepped carefully into the room, tall, dark suit, earpiece still crackling softly. "Sir, we reviewed all elevator footage from the last 6 hours." Luca crossed his arms slowly. "And nobody unauthorized entered the floor." "Impossible. There's more." The guard hesitated slightly before continuing. One camera feed was manually looped for exactly 4 minutes. Luca went still again. "Who has access to security overrides?" "Only inner circle personnel." The answer landed heavily in the room. "Betrayal inside the family." I saw the realization settle across Luca's face slowly. Controlled on the outside. Furious somewhere underneath. "Get Matteo and Victor downstairs," he ordered quietly. Now the guard nodded and disappeared immediately. I looked at Luca carefully. "You think one of your own people did this?" Luca rubbed one hand slowly across his jaw before answering. "Trust is expensive in my world. That is a depressing way to live." To my surprise, he looked almost amused for half a second. "You are beginning to understand why I do not smile much." I should not have noticed how tired he looked standing there in Elena's room, surrounded by ghosts. But I did, and somehow that felt dangerous too. Before either of us could speak again, a small voice echoed faintly from the hallway. "Claire, Noah." Luca's entire expression softened instantly at the sound. He moved toward the door, but I touched his arm lightly before he could leave. The contact lasted maybe 1 second. Barely anything. Yet Luca stopped immediately. Heat rushed unexpectedly through me when his eyes dropped toward my hand on his sleeve. "What?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. "Do not let Noah see whatever this turns into." Something unreadable flickered behind his gaze. Then he nodded once. "I will not." We stepped back into the hallway together. Noah stood near Sophia, looking nervous and small beneath the dim emergency lights still glowing red along the walls. The second he saw us, he hurried toward me instead of his father. Luca noticed that too. Of course he did. Noah wrapped both arms around my waist tightly. "The light scared me," he admitted softly. I crouched beside him carefully. "They are back now." Noah nodded uncertainly before looking toward Luca. Or the bad people go on silent stretch for one dangerous second too long. Then Luca walked toward his son and knelt beside him. "Nobody will touch you," he said quietly. The certainty in his voice sounded absolute. Noah studied him carefully. "And Claire?" The question hit harder than it should have. I saw it happen across Luca's face before he could hide it. Something fierce, protective. Possessive almost. "Nobody touches Claire either," he said softly. Then his phone vibrated sharply inside his pocket. Luca glanced at the screen once, and the color drained slightly from his face. "What is it?" I asked immediately. Luca looked up at me slowly. "Your apartment building." Cold flooded my body instantly. "What about it?" His jaw tightened once. "There was a fire in the unit directly across from yours about 20 minutes ago." My pulse stopped cold. "Was anyone hurt?" "No." Luca's eyes locked onto mine with terrifying intensity. "But the timing was not an accident."